And I'm gonna be high.
Good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man, yeah.
I'm a rocket man. And I'm gonna be
Rocket Man. I'm a rocket man. I wanna go to the moon.
So I had Todd, the great and powerful Todd Fain on, and he
Yes.
told me some stories about you, not on recording, but I didn't even know him. And so to prep you, one, this is more conversational, but the whole reason I'm doing this podcast is to talk about building businesses, and you're uniquely building a business, but you already built one and exited one. And I don't know how much you can talk about that. As much as you're willing to, I would love it.
Sure.
The idea is to have conversations that no one else in the industry. Well, what I like to say is the conversations that happen at conferences, and the stories that actually probably should be told out in the open without using names. This is a venue for that. And then I also just want to have some interesting content and get to know people, and Lance Healy, the industry should know you. So I am going to talk a lot about, or ask you a lot of questions about your first company you built. And I will talk about and ask you questions about the company you're building now. And then everywhere in between, your wife, your kids, your life, that type of stuff.
Yeah. Perfect.
So Lance Healy is the founder of freightfacts.io. Is that how you're branding it today?
It is.
All right. Tell me what that is so the audience gets their fill right away.
Sure, absolutely. So FreightFacts is kind of flipping the script on the scorecards. So we're aggregating data from most of the major LTL carriers and then creating a scorecard on the shippers based on their operational performance, their behavior performance, about 25 different factors that all kind of boil up into something like a credit score type of point system.
Okay.
So if a shipper is a 780 or a 430, people can know about that and drill down to see what's going on. What are their dwell times? How many reways, reclasses, accessorials, other types of things being used. So much like a credit score, it taught us all how to be better borrowers, right? So because now we have a history that follows us around. And that performance metrics, it tails us. But at the same time, it all taught us how to be better customers. And so we're really hoping to do that for the LTL industry as well, is to say, hey, there's some accountability, but it's also, here's a roadmap to say, here's how you get better.
Okay, there it is. I was hoping that I was going to ask you, is there a way for somebody to improve? Because it seems as though credit scores in general are difficult to improve. I have been a business owner for 4 years, and I think I have a 700 credit score, and I wish it was a lot higher. My wife's is 830, and I'm like, why? I don't understand. Everything's in my name too. I don't get it.
Yeah, but she
So how are you gonna
exercises that credit muscle more, right?
Yeah, she does. And she never missed a bill when she was younger, and I did. And, and when you start businesses, you take great financial risk and you miss bills. So that also happens
credit.
Yeah. If only the credit industry would be like, but I have a good business now. Can we forget about that? Or
can we start over?
Any way to get that removed? No. So for the audience's benefit, not everybody knows Lance Healy, the Lance Healy that I know. Give me a synopsis of why you started Banyan Technology, the founder of Banyan Technology. And I'm going to brag about you on the show. You might be uncomfortable about that. Todd Fain last week was very uncomfortable being bragged about on the show. But, Lance, in my opinion, is the godfather of the API, dynamic pricing, the API and LTL. And I think that's actually a true fact. And if it wasn't, I'd still say it. But you were the guy with the ideas in the 90s and early 2000s to do this LTL and API stuff. But why did you start Banyan to begin with?
Yeah, so Banyan, it started because I had another business previous to that, brokering construction materials, and we had to created a marketplace online for construction material in the mid 90s. And we had to coordinate all the freight ourselves, and that was painful. And honestly, we were too poor to afford SMC3 licenses. So we were like, hey, what else could we do? And so we started scraping carriers' websites because it was 1998, 99 at the time, and then helped start to introduce APIs to the carriers first for being able to rate and doing that. And we just built it for our own use in our construction materials business. And then a bunch of our customers were like, whoa, how'd you do that? And we're like, well, we just did this thing. It was a thing. And they were
Yeah.
like, can we
We got
use
these
it?
bots and we're
Yeah.
scraping.
Right. And then as we started doing more and more with APIs, then customers like, well, can we put our account numbers in there and get our rates back? And we're like, yeah, sure, we could do that. And then we're like, hey, we should charge for this.
Yeah.
And
The best
honestly,
business model. Hey, we have somebody who
right,
needs something. Can we charge
right.
them?
Can we make some money? And so we didn't know how to charge or anything. So we were just like, let's just do like $100 a month, you know? And then like 4 years later, somebody called us a SaaS model, and we were like, what's that? We had never heard of the term. So anyway, but yeah, it grew and improved, and that was fine. But actually, first businesses were in college, like 6 different companies in college, and ran the entrepreneurs club there, and that's how, paying for school and stuff like that. So
So
I'm
you've
pretty
just
much
always been an
unemployable.
entrepreneur, early and
Yeah,
often, as they say.
early,
You were
early and often. Yeah,
you had a couple that
yeah.
failed, I'm guessing. Didn't
Oh
work out.
yeah, spectacular. Remember that construction materials business I was just talking about? It's,
Mhm.
um, yeah, it was going really well, but and then this event happened in 2001, 9/11, and all commercial construction just stopped. And that's where we made the pivot to say, hey, instead of being a commercial construction materials company, what do you think about being a freight company, freight software company? And literally, it was kind of right after 9/11 that we had to make the pivot because market just dropped. And we're like, what do we have for assets that we could actually pivot to? And
Yeah.
that was the most logical choice. So we
You
went
know,
full bore into that.
that's kind of an interesting. So as I've been interviewing folks for this show and recording episodes, I interviewed the founder of Transfix. His name is Jonathan, one of the
Yeah,
co-founders, and he talked about just recently they sold their brokerage division to NFI, and now they're a tech company, and they split brokerage from tech because you can't do both, and brokers wouldn't
yeah.
buy tech from brokers. But it's kind of like he got to keep his core team, but he started a new venture almost,
Mhm.
and that was a macroeconomic pivot, and he made the most of it. And I think it's actually a really smart move, but it's
Definitely.
kind of similar. You
Yeah.
construction company was great, construction brokering supplies was great until all of a sudden no one was doing that. And so I think that a common theme already, and we're early in the episodes, is that really successful entrepreneurs don't let the macro control the fact that they're still going to have a business and make it successful, whether it's a freight business. Maybe you didn't think you'd find your way into that. And
Right.
also the theme in freight is I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who was like, yeah, I got a supply chain degree and wanted to be a freight broker. Uh, no one,
that
no one
they're out
plans their
there
life to be
now,
in freight.
but they weren't back in the day. Very rare. You're right. Extremely. It's a lot of conversations I start is, so how'd you get in this industry? Did you lose a bet like everyone else, or what happened?
Yeah. Did you not
Yeah.
fit in other places and this is your
Yeah.
niche? So yeah,
Yeah.
that seems to be a
Yeah.
trend. So so I'm going to kind of bounce around back and forth. I'm going to
Yeah. Sure.
weave, as
Okay.
the newest president-elect likes to say. He weaves. So I'm going to weave.
Okay.
And you founded Banyan because of a
Mhm.
need and because the construction brokerage dried up, and you had the same software, and you said, hey, I can sell SaaS. No one knew what that was. And then in 2019, 2020, you
Mhm.
exited Banyan. When was that?
I did in 2020. So it was a solid 20-year run.
Yeah.
Growth. Yeah, when we started, no one could spell API. Unfortunately, there's still some folks that can't.
Yeah, they
But
can spell EDI still,
yeah,
but
right. It's like, stop it. But it's now it was really cool and amazing when we first did it, and it was novel, and we had, big customers, and we were a 12-person shop that had no business supporting a lot of the big customers that we did. But it was novel and innovative, and so we could. Um, but then 20 years hence, it's, now it's getting to be a crowded space, all these other types of things. And um, I like the innovation. That's my
Yeah.
thing. So yeah. And dynamic pricing, we did some stuff with local couriers, integrated about 700 local couriers onto the same LTL API platform. So you could get
Super.
that. And then, but, I had some challenges with priorities with some of my board and my investors that said, no, they literally said, we don't need any more innovation. We just gonna focus on the APIs. And we had
Innovation and EBITDA don't always go well together, I suppose.
They don't, but they do go very well with longevity. And if you're in any kind of a tech space, it's innovate or die. So, but it's just, it's time for me to go. So, yeah.
Yeah, Banyan is still around, but
Yeah.
Lance is not at Banyan. And so you exited. And I think it's interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of backstory, and we don't have to get into all the details, but I think it's unique. And one, thank you for coming on the show, because I'm trying to create a platform for business owners who are still building businesses, but have like enough experience or expertise to share some tidbits for those who are still trying to build businesses, like me at Rocket Shipping, and many others in the freight space who are either agent owners or, maybe they are solopreneurs or 1099s, but they could start their own thing. And then there's a lot of tech. And so the reason I brought you on was to ask you questions like, okay, early on, did you raise money right away when you started Banyan, or when did you raise, and how did that dynamic shift your company? As 20 years is a huge run. So kudos to that.
Thanks,
but
man.
what was your experience with raising?
So the first thing we did, so I was lucky enough to have a really tremendous business partner, Jim Walborn, in the construction material space. So we had a physical concrete specialty supply house where we actually loaded drums of material. I was driving a forklift, loading bags of grout, for like specialty projects around Cleveland. And then from there, the internet came out, and I was like, hey, we should do something with this. So we cannibalized the revenue from the physical bricks and mortar business, quite literally, to the construction material marketplace. And then we cannibalized the revenue from that marketplace to help us start Banyan, to get the early pieces going. And then we also had some developer that was willing to work for free, for in exchange for some equity, and it was fake borrowing steel. I was bartending nights and weekends to eat, just the classic entrepreneur story. So yeah.
Although I will pull that thread a little bit.
Yeah.
You were bartending nights and weekends just so you could eat, and then you built that massive company and you're well off, and you still bartend nights and weekends. I think you just enjoy it.
Yeah. No. Now I'm in bars for different reasons. So yeah,
you're playing the bongo drums, and we'll get into that in the episode, but I can't give the whole thing away yet. So bongo drums and Lance Healy, they do go hand in hand, but we'll get into that. So you scrapped it together, and you did the opposite of raise money to start, but you convinced people to give you their time for equity, or to give you their time for cheap, and you cannibalized revenue from other companies, which I think, a lot of companies that have been successful in this space started from other brands. Like Rocket Shipping was not my first company. Right. I had an e-commerce brand, and I had a 1099 agency thing before, and I've kind of cannibalized those to build a bigger brand. And then I've made mistakes to try to keep that model going. And I tried to start more brands after, and they have failed. And I'd cannibalize Rocket Shipping revenue to start a truckload brokerage. That was a terrible idea, actually. So,
this is how we learn, right?
Yeah. I was doing great. And then 2022, I'm like, I should have a truckload brokerage. And so I started it in early 2023. Great timing, Gabe. Really smart. The contract rates worked out so well for me.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man.
Brilliant. Yeah. It's
Yes, if
something.
I can run one freight company, I could start a completely different model with carrier sales, and it'll be the same as
Sure.
LTL and tech. It's not. Just
No.
so we're on the
Yeah.
same page. We still run
Yeah.
truckload, but we do it through an agent model now because I'm not a carrier sales builder and a high revenue burn rate type of founder. I just don't know how to
Yeah.
do that.
No.
Um,
And yeah. And it's the same way. It's just, um, that. So, um, s- and a lot of it, you don't, when you're going to the bootstrap and then you got to get to that next, whatever that next level is. And so we went and found some angel investors around Cleveland. So we did the angel round
okay.
after that, and we found there's in almost every municipality, there's some sort of economic development engine there that's there to help and support, whether it's through the SBA or whatnot,
Hmm.
to help support new local startups. So anybody looking to do something, go find that in your area, and they can help direct you to angel networks or capital and whatnot. So we ended up getting a combination of angels and some matching funds from a local tech startup group here in Cleveland called Jumpstart, and
Nice.
that helped us get our first hires, and that also gave us some space to work in as a tech company, and completely let go of the construction material stuff, because the other
Awesome.
thing they told us is like they just slapped us and it was like pick one, you can't do both, but pick one. And we're like, okay. So that was really good sound advice. So like, yeah, we're gonna be a logistics tech company. Cool. All right, now go be it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that besides TQL and maybe CH Robinson, if you're trying to be everything to everyone, you're going to probably have some failure, or people will say if they're going to give you any money, pick one.
Yes.
And it
Yeah.
seems to be a theme. And then I also think that if you're going to be a startup all the way up to a mid-market company with 100 employees, just pick
Yeah.
one thing and be better than everybody else at it by an iteration or two, and you'll have a lot more success, in my opinion,
And
than if you're going
absolutely
to
right.
offer truckload, air, ocean, drayage,
Yeah.
LTL, parcel, all in one. Like you can't be
Right.
great at any of them then. And
No.
then you're a commodity.
Yep. Yep. And then you're meh on all
Yeah, you're
categories.
not
So yeah.
bad. Maybe you don't have a bad reputation, but
It's okay. It's hard, yeah. But yeah, so from a fundraising perspective, we did that, got some angels. There's really interesting stories of, and trials and tribulations on that. So we went up at we had commitments from angels and we're out of money, like literally out of money. And I was supposed to go collect a check from one of our angel investors, and he was downtown Cleveland. I parked in the parking garage, and I couldn't get out of that parking garage until I got the check because I didn't have enough money
because you had to
to
clear
pay
the
for
gate.
parking. So I had to go walk to the bank, get the check in, deposit it, get some out, and then be able to make sure that cleared to get out of there. But yeah,
Oh man, that's awesome. I
yeah,
mean, I think you don't have to have a story like that in order to be like a really successful company, and you can have always made. But I just think it makes it
Mhm.
more fun to hear stories like that because I've asked a couple of the people I've had on, like, did you ever have sleepless nights, not wondering if you're going to make payroll, and how long did that
Oh,
last, and all of those
jeez,
things, and
yeah,
and I
yeah,
think that I thought when I started Rocket that I wouldn't have those sleepless nights for long because it was just me. And then I hired a bunch of people. And then I was like, okay, we got a
yeah.
lot of profit. We're fine. And then turns out if you hire more people and you have more revenue and just more people and more revenue, you
Mm,
never really clear yourself from that worry of payroll because you
right.
just are investing in growth ahead of the curve. And so,
Yeah,
sure, you made a bunch more revenue and a bigger dollar amount of profit, but your payroll is 5 times the size it used to be. So
right.
it's always
It's just
fun to,
shifting the problem. Yeah,
yeah, it's just a bigger
yeah,
problem now. It's 30 people to let down instead of three. So
yeah, yeah,
I do
yeah.
like to hear those stories of that's pretty good. A distinct story of in a parking garage, you can't leave it because
No,
you
it's
got to get that money in the
it's
bank.
like no, I wasn't taking no for an answer. I was like, no, no, we need
uh, one
this.
of my one of my VPs, he had a business before we both started Rocket, and I hired him as was my second employee. And he had a business where there was days where he wasn't going to make payroll unless he collected the invoices. So he'd have to go knock doors in the area and get the check for the open invoices so he could make the payroll in time, and bank to bank, checks to checks. I started Rocket during COVID, so I never was able to do that way, but I was like trying to figure out what an ACH was and how to move money around to the right.
Can I get this
I didn't know how to
today?
do any
I
of
will
that.
take a credit card. Yeah, exactly. You
I'm
learn
like, if
pretty
I don't
quick.
run payroll 3 days in advance, it doesn't clear on that day. How do I wire somebody money?
Yeah,
Yeah.
No, that's it. That was one thing that Jim, my partner, and I were most proud of. Even in those early years, we never once missed a payroll for our employees. Never once.
Yeah,
Like
you missed them for yourself, but never for your
yeah.
employees. That's the thing.
Absolutely, yeah, because they made the commitment to come to us. If we're not successful enough to get this, that's our fault, not theirs.
Yeah,
they're doing their job. They're doing their job phenomenally. So
I think that's
how that worked. But,
and that's a small thing. It's like one or two people, right? But it's the principle that you wouldn't be able to build a company and be the CEO for 20 years if you didn't have that principle when you started it. So I think that is waxing philosophical. That's probably a trait that you have to have a good culture to build a company for 20 years too. Because if you don't have that innate, it's a little easier to cut corners and to say, oh, everybody's got to take a pay cut. And, it's a little easier to ask for those things. Not that can also be a success story. I think that,
sometimes
I don't remember the name of it.
Necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I want to say I heard it on, it might've been like Craig Fuller's origin story. He had to go to his partners and ask everybody to take pay cuts to make it through. And now they're a big success. I think it was him on a podcast talking about that. So that's also, you're all in it together then. So
yeah, exactly. And that's cool. And when you're a startup, you got two currencies. You got time, cash, and then you got equity. And a lot of people don't treat those as equal currencies. I mean, equity's got a really, really big interest rate. If you think about that, think about it now.
If you think about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But no, it's always adventures. But you really, as you've seen and probably may see from other entrepreneurs and on the cast, is you learn, you get naked fast, right? So, okay, here's reality. Here's what's going on. This is what's happening. And there's a lot of demons you can't hide from anymore because the buck stopped.
That's
yeah.
It's
You don't wanna
it's a
pick
little
up
too
that
close to
phone.
home, right?
Yeah, you don't want to pick up that phone. Too damn bad. Pick up the damn phone.
Yeah. Someone's gotta.
Yeah, like who else is gonna do it? Nobody.
Yeah.
So all of those things, and and that's okay. But it's a journey beyond just spreadsheets and stuff like that. It's an evolution personally too. So.
Yeah. So shifting gears a bit. So you talk about it being a journey. You were a CEO founder for 20 years at the same company, and now you're 32 years old. Kidding. But so you're still young. And I think that I don't know what your opinion is on this. I have not scripted any of these interviews, so I don't know what you're going to say on this, but why start another thing? If you don't have to, right? Are you bored? Is it the itch? Did you not get the first stop wasn't what you wanted it to be, so you're doing it again? Why start another thing?
Yeah, all of the above. So when I left, I took most of the year off. I did a little bit of consulting, but I basically swung a hammer out at a lake house that we have, and it would have been cool if I was handy. And I figured out, okay, I'm not a contractor, but it's fine. Everything's fine. But yeah, I knew I wanted to do something else, and I knew that there was still a lot more that I wanted to contribute into the evolution of that. And you don't have to be in freight long enough to know that there's plenty of problems to solve, right?
Yeah.
So it's like just pick some and go. And so yeah, I really wanted to do a bunch of things. So I thought, my first stop was I'd never really had a job where I actually just wasn't the owner,
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, how blissful that must be. No, but
It's
Um,
tempting sometimes, Lance.
yeah, I know it is. And I was like, well, I'm gonna try it on the other side. And and I went and did some work for somebody with the understanding that it could evolve into, um, but ownership and spinning off a division of that company. Which is why I was like, okay, this is cool. And it didn't work out. I'm not a good employee. I'm really not, which is okay. It's self-awareness. But uh, and then just really needed to just start something else. And my hope is that in 2 or 3 years, maybe, I build Freight Facts up, we find a good exit partner, and then I'm gonna go do something else. I want to go
Yeah.
start something else. I have no idea what that's going to be yet, because 3, 4 years from now, the market's going to be different, the tech's going to be different, the
Yeah.
opportunities, problems are going to be different. But I just know that that's what I'm good at. I'm not a guy that can take a company public. I'm not a guy that's really wants to manage anybody, let alone a large entity. So yeah, no, even at Banyan, I made sure I didn't have any direct reports. Um,
Yeah, that's awesome.
I just,
You're aware of it at least, right? So you
yeah,
knew
no,
where your strengths were.
yeah. And, so I was chief innovation officer. It's like there. So
Yeah, what is Elon Musk? He calls himself Techno King instead of CEO. Techno King is his title with the SEC, and it's hilarious.
that's fun. Yeah, but no, so that's fine. That's good. It's just, be honest with yourself and know what's the right fit. So
Well, I think that you have the benefit of looking backwards at 20 years and seeing all the things that you did wrong. And during it was maybe harder to see than it is after. But I think that the best entrepreneurs that I've seen are aware of what they're not good at. They
Yeah.
might not be all that self-aware about their personality or their traits, but they're aware that they're not a good manager, or they're not a good, maybe they're an engineer, but they're not a CTO. They can't lead a dev team, but they can code.
Right.
And I, by experience of failing multiple times at trying to be a sales leader, because I was a sales-led founder, I'm not a sales leader. But
Yeah.
Troy Barter, our head of revenue, that guy's a sales leader. He was a sales leader at PandaDoc, and before that at Verizon, and he leads sales teams. So I pay him to work here, and he does a much better job than me. Although,
Yeah.
I mean, me and him go back and forth at who's better at sales. But
Well, just saying.
but no, he's a much better sales leader, and I always struggled and always have struggled at being able to explain what I do and why I do it to anybody else, but I can do it. And so I think that of the interviews I've had so far and podcasts I've been on, the best business leaders were always good at identifying what they weren't good at and hiring people to do that.
Yeah.
I do think probably their biggest weakness is still, as entrepreneurs, is still like, oh, anything new I'll take on, because it's just innate, right? You're talking about starting the next thing and the next thing. So you like to build. There's still probably better ways to do that than just take on anything. Oh, it's a new process in finance. I'll do it because I'm a builder. Well,
yeah.
maybe you could hire
But
a
you're not a
controller. I don't know.
guy. So yeah, I scribble on whiteboards, and then I hand it to somebody that can execute.
Yeah.
Like, here's where I live.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So-
it's good.
So one angle I haven't talked about on any of the episodes so far is that a couple of the people I've interviewed have had business partners, and I think you said it was Jim is your business your
Jim
co-founder.
Walborn. Yep.
So did you guys go 50-50, or how did you do a partnership? Like, how did that dynamic look, and how do you work well with somebody else when you're Lance Healy, you're a builder?
Yeah.
How do you work well with another founder?
We really complemented each other well.
Okay.
He really loved to kind of run the shop, and I was always the guy out front at the trade shows, at the bar, doing that kind of stuff.
Playing the harmonica.
Right.
Okay.
Maybe sometime. But he was a good manager. He did a great job with the accounting and the detail work that I don't do well.
Yeah.
so that was fantastic. The best thing about from a partnership perspective was it was 100% built on mutual trust because we know, you know, I'd love to use the example of politics, but I really can't in this day and age. But you have two sets of people that want the best for our country. Generally, you
Mm-hmm.
strip it down, whether either side of the aisle you're on, everyone thinks they have the best vision to how to make our country better, right? They're
Yeah.
just different tactics. And so there's our tactic, here's our tactic. Now it's more like who's winning. But anyway, the in a business partnership, it's you have that same trust of I'm not trying to win. I'm just trying to say, hey, here's a different view, and here's how I think we should. Here's an idea how we should do it, and then we get together. And we'd have arguments or whatever, but then we come out and be like, okay, I see your point on this, and he'd be like, I see your point on that, and then it's like, okay, let's talk it out and figure what we can come up with.
Yeah.
So it's that crossing the aisle and really not digging into about ego and who wins. The ego is how does the business win?
Yeah, the North
Um,
Star is business success, and then to
Bingo.
figure out how to get there and who's got the best idea. Do you think
Yeah,
that? Do you think that? And it sounds like you have a high opinion of Jim, and so
I
it
do.
sounds like it's worked out for you guys.
Yeah,
A lot of people that have business partners, it's a failure, but that's not because of the people. It's just because the business failed, and then of course they could be mad at each other. But do you think you guys? How important do you think it is to be like? For a marriage term to be equally yoked with a business partner, as in like you're both capable, and that accountability and trust comes from the fact that you know the other person's also excellent at this thing.
yeah. Um, Equally yoked, yes. But let me put it this way: it's as long as it's defined yoke, right? If
Yeah,
there's
so maybe his
one,
is accounting and operations, and yours is sales and this, but
yeah,
he's as good at that as you are at your thing. Is that that's what I'm trying
yes,
to dig in? Is that an important
yes.
dynamic to you?
It is. It is. And the work ethic is critical. So like, it's always in before your employees. Always be there before your employees. Always leave after your employees.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. It's like it doesn't matter. What do you need? It's yes. Let's make it happen. Get it done. If as long as they have that same thing, other than like, well, I'm going golfing on Thursday afternoon. I'm like, is it with a client? No. I had a business partner like that in college, and it was kind of like there's the ham and the chicken show up for breakfast, right? The chicken's
Yeah.
participating, the ham's committed. So the pig's committed.
Oh, the ham is
Um,
committed.
so to find that level of commitment is critically important.
Yeah, I think that is probably the one lesson I've already learned is that one at Rocket Shipping, I have two VPs, but they're employed in 1 and 2, and now they have equity in my tech brand, and we're co-founders in that. And
Awesome.
it was built off of a mutual. We've all built it together, and now let's get equity in the next thing. But I've also failed at this in that I've had equity partners in a truckload brokerage, and that completely failed. And I already talked about that, but it wasn't. We weren't equally yoked in the fact that they were both very skilled people, but they wanted, to lead people. And unfortunately, when you found a company from scratch, you have to be able to do all the things. You can't lead
Yeah.
anything except for activity. And
Right.
so I learned real quickly that, and I don't have any hard feelings against these people, right? And like, they're not at Rocket anymore, but if I saw them on the street or at a trade show, I'd say hi.
Yeah.
But everybody fits in a different role, and there's only a few people out there that are built to be like founders that are going to work until the job's done and do all the tasks until they can afford to hire somebody to do the tasks. So
Right.
that's my own business failure, right? And I've already identified, okay,
It's a lesson.
you can't just put things together and say, yes, let's have it work, because everybody has mismatching skill sets. And I misquoted, and I took out of context one of my favorite people to follow. His name is Alex Hormozzi. And he said, every business should have 3 people, but if those 3 people do anything that's crossover, don't do it. One person who has money and not time, one person who has time and not money, and the other person that can run the business, right?
Yeah.
But if you have 3 engineers, why would you do that? You need one sales rep and one engineer if you're going to partner.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when you talk about, running Banyan for 20 years, you kind of had, I would guess, maybe a blue ocean to start. No one else was doing it.
Right.
Tell me about the first couple of years of when you guys started to compete. Maybe, I don't know if it was Project 44 who competed with you, or if there was others that, ended up being more significant than that. But was it Four Kites, whoever it might have been? How did that transition, and what did you have to do differently then?
No. It's definitely P44 was the first one that came out of competing with us. Carrier Direct was one of our best resellers of our API products, and then
What is Carrier Direct?
they're kind of a consulting company. Jet
Okay.
McLandris had started it prior to P44. They were doing like some carrier agency stuff and things. Really good and innovative, and working with companies like that. And from there, P44 started. So, but
Okay.
what they did differently than us is they went out and got $10 million, and even though they were introducing the product, but their marketing was fantastic and just really eclipsed the message from what we had on a shoestring budget. Trying to market without any real resources behind it, because our investors were local angels, not private equity and venture capital companies. So our guys were like, "Here's $1." And,
$1 to their 10 every time.
right, to their 10,000, yeah. But it was it was significantly undermatched and outgunned when it came to owning the message in the market.
Okay.
So hats off, chalk up the wow, that was sucked. But cool. But
Yeah,
for
see,
the
this is
first, yeah. So
this is good. I'll pause you there just because, like, when I said who's Carrier Direct, one, I'd only heard that name one time, but I did know that was like a precursor to P44. But a lot of people in the industry walk around and they tell stories like this, but no one ever talks about it. And it's just kind of this weird thing. And this isn't as nearly as controversial as I'd like to be someday, where I talk about like the LTL Boys Club and SMC3 and all of those things.
yeah.
But I am going to SMC3 for the first time this year.
Oh,
So
all
I'm going to
right,
be there in
cool.
January.
I
So
will
if you
see you
guys are
there.
listening to this, let's get there, and I'll meet you guys
Yeah.
there. I'm sure Lance will be there.
Absolutely. Oh, I've got some
But
SMC3 stories too. But anyway,
yeah, and there's
of course.
there's stories that can be on podcasts and there's stories that can't. But I do think it is interesting just to kind of sit around a campfire, have a beer, and talk about how did Worldwide Express and Project 44 and Global Trans and Banyan, how did these all start?
Mhm.
And people often will talk about backhaulers to C.H. Robinson, to Coyote and the Silvers. There's lots of fun stories there. I think there's just as many fun stories in LTL and Global Trans and the Letos and all of that. And so hopefully someday I'll get Andrew and Michael, maybe Andrew or Michael, on the show. Maybe Jet McCandles will join. I've said his name on 2 episodes now, so you have to join, Jet. Somebody tag him. Cool. Tell your story of P44 worldwide, all of it.
Yeah.
But when you talk about, some competition in the marketplace, what would you say was the hardest point in Banyan's history? Was it when that competition came? Was it before, when you're maybe not covering payroll and having to go figure that stuff out? Or was it towards the end and it wasn't having to do with the market, it was having to do with investors and all of that? What's the hardest point in Lance's business career?
Yeah, definitely walking away. Everything before that were just challenges that could be overcome. Like, it's just, what's the next obstacle? It's
right.
not like, what are we gonna do today? What am I dealing with? What's on fire?
Choose your suck.
Right. Well, the door number 3, Bob. But
it's all gonna suck. Just do one of them.
Yeah, but making the decision to say, you know what, I didn't get Banyan into the big exit that we had initially built it for, partly, because of investors and the board, and that they didn't want to do that. They just wanted to kind of keep it down here and bump it along. And, we had opportunities, and in my opinion, I mean, we with the local carrier stuff. That was in 2017, 18.
That would
Could
have
you
been a good
imagine?
time to do something cool.
Right? Because like 2020, there was a kind of a demand for that. But anyway,
Yeah, a huge demand for it.
yeah, dynamic pricing. I got a patent on that. My last day at Banyan, I defended the patent to get it issued.
Really?
Yeah, and
You're dynamic pricing
mhm.
father. You're the father of dynamic
Yeah,
pricing.
yeah. 2017, created it in 2012, and then worked with Mr. Todd Fain on developing it. He worked with me at Banyan for a couple of years, and
Yeah.
that was part of that development. But yeah, so we did, um, yeah. So got a patent on that, and then decided I weren't going to do anything with it. So I was like, okay,
Oh man, dynamic pricing is so I'm
Mm.
in the LTL space, as
Yeah,
people likely know, but dynamic pricing is still well, ABF rolled it out pretty early, and in
they
2020,
did.
it was my favorite thing in early 2021 because I won so much freight off of ABF's
Yeah,
dynamic rates
yeah,
on a rate shop. Because if you're in a TMS and you're being rate shopped and you have dynamic pricing and everybody else has static Mercury
right.
Gate SMC3 rates,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
even fair.
I know, I
Now that
know. So we
don't
rolled it
get too
out
used to it
in.
though if you're an LTL broker, because then ABF took it away and they said, "Hey, you
Right.
can still have it, but it's just not nearly as good a candy."
Right.
So
And it got smarter. And we were doing it in 2018, 19 with Yellow XPO. We had a few other carriers that were dabbling with it. And
yeah,
our broker customers at Banyan were just like, this is awesome. And their margins on shipments, on LTL shipments, were just explosive.
yeah,
And one company, which I won't mention, but they ended up selling their business because their margins on per revenue LTL were significantly higher than the industry average. And that was because of our dynamic pricing tools. But anyway,
yeah. Well, I mean, the dynamic pricing tools put in the wrong hands could have been the biggest profit center for LTL brokers in history because they were
hmm
beating one carrier would beat a different carrier by $500, but these brokers had built in tech to be able to say, okay, but only win by 30.
right,
And so it's amazing for brokerages to make a profit and make some fat rips. But I think that the idea of dynamic pricing is just smarter for LTL carriers, because if your goal is to fill your truck and you can
right.
take a snapshot of your network at any given time of
hmm
throughout the day
Yeah,
and say, hey, in Omaha, we have a bunch of empty trailers, fill them. You're going to move the trailers in LTL anyways. They're
yeah,
always moving. It's not
absolutely.
truckload where you're consolidating. It's
Nope.
not hub and spoke to the point where, Roadrunner would wait until everything was loaded, then line haul it. And that's why
Right.
transit times would get lower. And Chicago was a wasteland
Yeah.
and you never knew where your freight would be because it's somewhere in Chicago. But if they all implement that, and I think right now XPO, FedEx, Avrit,
hmm
probably more than that, have the dynamic pricing. And I
And
think
there's
they use
different
it a lot more for
versions.
the direct customers than they do for the 3PLs, but they are offering
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And it's good for them. You have the contract freight that builds your line haul base, right? But
Yeah.
now the idea and taking the dynamic pricing to Optum, which they build the back end systems for line haul and route P&D management for a lot of the LTL carriers, is they have the visibility. I'm 1,200 pounds short on this lane, so I got to do a break bulk. But if
Yeah.
I could just fill my trailer
I could
with an
send it
extra
all the
1,200
way.
pounds, I just made every shipment on that truck more profitable. That was
Yeah.
the whole promise of the real use of dynamic pricing. It wasn't about low cost rate shopping. It was about being more efficient with your networks in a dynamic way that could maximize your asset utilization. That driver's contracted. He's coming back from Omaha tonight
No matter
with
what.
one
He's an
pallet.
overnight driver.
Yeah, he's coming. He's got to come back. He's coming back. So by being able to see that and saying, hey, anything that in these terminal service zip codes that comes up, automatically discounted by 10%. And
Yeah.
let's start loading that freight in.
And you know what my favorite part of dynamic pricing is and will
Mm,
be for forever,
mm,
besides the LTL carrier efficiency, is billing variances don't exist.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter if it gets reclassed or reweight. No, that was this is a rate and there's a quote and it's like a live, and that forever I will, go on and on and on about freight bill auditing and variances and LTL and NMFC, and I could go at length. And there's plenty of podcasts that talk about that stuff. But
for sure,
you can. There's several different ways to find out all that stuff. But if you just think about my biggest, or I guess what parallel I would draw here, and this might be totally off, so just tell me I'm stupid if I am, but backhauling and dynamic pricing seem to be like the parallel from truckload to LTL. Like it's the same concept. And American backhaulers started doing that, and then C.H. Robinson and the Robinson Produce and all that story. Yeah. But in LTL, it's like, one or two carriers rolled it out, but it's not like an industry adopted thing yet still.
No.
And I don't understand why. It's almost the same concept.
A lot of people are rolling it out wrong. Like some people have said, hey, we've got dynamic pricing, but then you look at it and you scratch the paint and it's like, well, no, it's not. You're just adjusting a tariff every month instead of twice a year, or something, and it's like, oh, it's not dynamic, but it's when it's integrated into your operations. That's really the point of it. And keep in mind, dynamic can go up as well as down. Yeah. Right. And so it gives the carriers a chance to react much faster, to market condition changes. So that's why you see a lot of, XPO and some of the other carriers that have it, they'll put their small, medium businesses on it, and they're just happy to get rates, right? Hey, we got direct rates. Awesome. It's great for brokers too. Hey, I'll give you direct rates on a dynamic.
It's not a blanket program. So that's actually where I was going to go. It's a great transition because for so long and still today, and, and I am friendly with Curtis Garrett, and I talked to him about this offline about how it's so difficult to break into the LTL industry because there's 5 brokers that hold all the 3PL blanket rates. And so you can be an agency of them, or you can try to start your own and get blanket rates. And you'd have to have a TMS, and you'd have to know how to do LTL pricing. You have to pay SMC3 a ton of money. And if you don't do that, then you need everything on an API connection, and FedEx Freight updates their API like once every 40 years. And so it's like really difficult to build into it. And if you want their new home delivery pricing, it's and so it's so hard to break in.
Yeah, it is. And you get into partners, partner networks or agents, and then there's still always that itchy scratchy in the back of the head of, well, we're both truckload brokers, but I'm using your LTL rates too.
Thank you. And then I do think though that technology, and I talked in an earlier episode with Todd Fain about the carrier agent model and how there's a bunch of TMS companies masquerading as a TMS, but they're really a carrier agent model. And I don't like that part of the industry either. But one thing that is going to come that's good with API, besides just like the EBOLs, and I know you got the digital counsel, I'm going to ask you some questions about that. But besides that side of it, for companies like Rocket, 5 years ago, if I would have had a different path, I might have taken it. But to democratize the access to connect and get pricing with LTL carriers, you used to have Zarlight, and now you can have API rate bases, and you can just plug it in if you can build the API. But if you have dynamic pricing, you could have that as your quote unquote blanket, and then do CSP, and then have an actual blanket. And you could run so many programs all from one API connection and change the keys.
Absolutely.
That now it's about tech, and you just go get customers. You don't need the blankets as often, right? I am a huge believer in 3PL blanket rates for most of the mid-market, and anybody who's shipping inbound from 1,000 locations. Doesn't matter if you go straight to R&L. You're not going to get the pricing you want that's not better than a 3PL agency blanket rate. But if it's all outbound one location and all these different, like there's a lot of variability. So I could go on and on way too long for the audience to care. But let me pull the thread of thank you. I appreciate that. So let me pivot to API tech and how it's going to revolutionize everything. But what do you think will actually happen with I'll just let you talk about it instead of prompting it. Tell me about the digital counsel and the changes that are coming, and then I'll pick it apart. Fair enough.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I am super bullish on it. I'm super excited about it. I've been actively involved in it for probably almost 2 years now. Led a couple of the workshops. things I like about it. It is a really amazing cross-section of volunteers that have come together, from the largest of C.H. Robinson technical teams to carrier folks to brokers and all kinds of different folks that have come together to said, hey, we need standards, but while we're doing the standards, we need to improve things. So it's not just to standardize what already exists. So
Yeah.
we're creating things like so there's a standard API for a pickup request, but also then contains pickup visibility. So as a broker, you can now track your truck inbound to the pickup location. It will notify you on stops away. I'm 3 stops away, I'm 2 stops away, I'm 1 stop away. Won't give you time or anything, or geolocation, but because there's security risk. But having that capability, and then as soon as it's picked up, you have tracking visibility from there. Now I can track with through partner networks for carriers that have agents and partners. Now I can track. I know where it is in a terminal. I'd add the address, contact information from the terminal if it needs to be rescued. I mean, all of these things that we all wish we had back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, they are real. And this is what the Digital LTL Council is doing: is creating, like, if you had the brass ring and could define the best frickin' thing ever, what are we missing today that would make everyone's lives better and reduce the amount of phone calls? And soon there's in transit. So you'll get a preliminary invoice through an API, and then you can dispute or track changes to that preliminary invoice while the shipment is in transit.
That's pretty
Right?
well. So what's interesting is I have been more than dabbling in the final mile space for the last 2 years.
Awesome.
And as we've built out tech in final mile and home delivery, and that's, like, we talked about this earlier, not being everything to everybody.
Yeah.
That's what we're really good at, is home delivery and LTL. That's what we're good at. And we are tech enabled, right?
Yes.
We're not a TMS only company, but our tech is all API because we built it in the last couple of years, and we've leveraged several partners who have helped do that, and they've been awesome. But in final mile, this exists already: geo-fencing, geolocation, next stop, all of that.
Yep.
But it's all about the home delivery. And I think that serves its purpose. And people probably took it way too far. And, like, my hot take is that nobody cares about where the shipment's at as long as it delivers on time.
Right.
That e-commerce companies cared so much about how do we tell them everything that's going to happen with their order. I'm like, just deliver it and set real expectations and have it be out there on time. And they don't have to be there to sign for it.
Yeah.
And you'll probably be able to be totally fine.
Right.
But I actually think that I've always had an opinion that was way overbuilt, right? And there's plenty of platforms that I won't name, but there's like 5 or 6 that have built a TMS visibility platform just for final mile. So it's like event triggering all these things, and it's for the end consumer who just ordered a couch online to use. And it was the wrong place to build it. And it should have been built in LTL pre-pickup visibility and LTL line hauls and terminals, because logistics managers and supply chains depend on the middle mile and when it's going to get there much more than the end user who just happens to complain and leave a bad review.
Right.
And
Because
so I'm
we
excited
got
to hear
break
about
bulk
this.
and everything else. Yeah, no, exactly. It's there's so many benefits from this that go beyond just the initial use and adoption of the standard APIs. Yes, there's going to be huge things, but when we look beyond, okay, when you have a level of standardization that gets to the industry, whether it's EDI or API or whatever, you now have a foundation that you can then start to build the next tier of technology on top of. And that's, to me, what really excites me, because now if I know I have standard accessorial codes across all carriers, I know I have standard billing exceptions, pickup delivery exceptions across all carriers. That's part of what we're doing at the Digital LTL Council. That's coming out. If I know I have that, let's just take one AI, for example. What could I do and put on top of that? Because now I'm not spending all this brain trust and pain and suffering to normalize what does appointment mean from this carrier versus that carrier. It's like, damn.
What is limited access?
Yeah.
Is it a farm, a house, an apartment,
Prison,
a storage unit, a hotel?
Yes, but there's different
Yeah.
degrees. Yeah, right. So it's getting to that standardization that now allows us to then build the next tier on top of that. So that's what I'm really excited about is, yes, it's going to be huge efficiencies for everybody, carriers,
hmm
brokers, shippers alike. Better visibility for carriers. We'll notify you when a shipment's getting delayed now. That's, and here's why. Um, boom, I can, no false deliveries from a partner carrier when,
Yeah.
I can use yellow because they're out. But
Yeah.
when yellow says it's delivered and and it's not because they sent it to a local carrier out for delivery, it's still out for delivery.
Yeah, they used Magnum over in North Dakota.
Yeah,
No, or
fantastic.
whoever it might be. Valley
Yeah,
Cartage out of Minnesota. I know
right.
all the partner carriers because I felt all this pain as an LTL broker for the last 10 years and 4 at
Yes,
Rocket Shipping,
right.
calling a terminal saying, "Why isn't this delivered?" And they're like, "Oh, it's out for delivery with our
Yeah.
partner carrier." And you're like,
But
"Who's
it
that?"
says delivered, right?
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
you call the partner carrier, they're like, "Oh, we just got that this morning. It's out for delivery next week. We go there once a week. Sorry."
yeah, that's a
And
rural route. Sorry. Yeah,
exactly, that's why they partnered
exactly.
it off. But
Uh-huh.
and then backing it up to like the terminal level, when you need to rescue something
Mhm.
and you call, I can use yellow as well because they don't
Yeah,
exist.
right.
When you call yellow and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's not, it's stuck on the truck. So sorry,
Yeah,
we
a
don't know
flat
where."
tire. Another
Yeah,
flat
it's
tire.
because they
Yeah,
don't know where it's at. They don't know if it's
right,
at their terminal. They don't want to go look on the dock to see if they can rescue a pallet and have an agent come pick it up.
right.
And the amount of times I'd had to negotiate on a Thursday at 6 p.m. with a
Uh-huh.
terminal, please release my freight so I can
Yeah,
make this delivery with a hot shot.
right.
If you could actually see that tracking event and make it, it really does
Yeah,
make the industry better. And I think that people like you that are volunteering and
yeah,
making the industry better, you have my thanks.
yeah,
Now, going to more of an opinion topic.
yeah, yeah.
So here's a trend I see, and it is talking about Banyan and Project 44 and APIs. As an LTL broker and the space I've been in, I started at Unishippers, then I was at DLS Worldwide, then I started Rocket Shipping.
Yeah.
We have an agency model, we have our own tech, we do our own CSPs, we have a lot of LTL, but final mile home delivery is what we do and what we do best.
Nice.
So the trend I see is that all these big companies didn't have TMS systems, so they used MercuryGate, and
Mhm.
SMC3 was baked right in.
Yeah,
They could manage the Czar-Light tariffs.
yeah,
So that was how blanket programs worked. Then Global Trans started Expedia for freight.
yeah.
And it was, I think, maybe on MercuryGate to start, but it was off right away. I
Mhm.
don't actually know the story of that, and I'm going to hopefully get that.
It's a pretty long time actually. It was on their
Yeah, and
version of
eventually they went
MercuryGate.
cloud and they went on
Mhm.
their own, and now almost every big box 3PL, Global Trans Worldwide, and Unishippers are all the same company,
Mhm.
but
Right.
they're all off of MercuryGate for the most part, and they have their own cloud systems, and so they don't use MercuryGate, and they compete against them instead.
Mhm.
But now I think the same thing's happening to Banyan and P44, where
Mhm.
they're not going to use a consolidator to connect to all the LTL carriers because they can build their direct API connections because it's more standardized than it used to be. And so the big 3PL brokers and really the 5 that matter, right?
Mhm.
They're building directly into FedEx, into Asaya, and even into like cross country Magnum small
Mhm.
ones because they can.
Right.
And they're
Yeah.
doing it because they have enough money to build ahead.
Yeah.
And so
And
that's
it's about
already
to get
happening. That's not an opinion, right?
correct. Correct.
But what's next then would probably be SMC3 Czar-Light rates being faded out and being competed against by direct API dynamic pricing. And is that probably, I think that happens next if it's not already.
I
And
mean, this.
SMC3 has the NMFC stuff, but do they have a big enough moat? And does Project 44 have a big enough moat to defend against their biggest customers building direct?
No, not for that.
Yeah.
I don't think and SMC3 threw their hat into the game, years after Banyan and P44 and they're building a good product, but with the new API standards, there still be some market there that somebody
Yeah.
just wants to hit the easy button and do it. But it's you build one, and that's the whole point of the Digital Tail Council is now we have a standard. So
Exactly.
yeah, we're good. I just sub in the accounts and the names and, we're good to go. So their long-term value proposition is absolutely a declining market, right? If that's the one trick pony. Um,
But that could be the same thing as your brokerage construction materials, and you just say, hey, I have this thing. What else can I use it for? But I kind of feel like a reckoning is coming for both P44, Banyan, and SMC3.
Mm-hmm.
If that was a huge revenue portion of their business, and it wasn't, and this is maybe too hot of a take, but it's fine. It's my podcast.
Yeah,
What are they going to do?
Yeah.
I'm not being mean, but if they built a business that was successful because of the necessity of the company using them to have it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't do business without them. As you had to have seen that as soon as someone could do business without paying a cost per transaction, they would run to do it. Right?
Right. We did.
So like, how did they long tail that in their head thinking that would work out? I just, I haven't been around long enough to know all of it. And I hear some of the stories of the beginnings, but if I'm building rocket shipping and I knew for sure that all of my shippers were going to go direct and stop using me as a broker, then I would stop getting customers on my brokerage and build TMS and integrate directly in API and manage their direct tariffs, kind of like I am, because that's what I do. Because I can see that coming, because brokerages aren't as useful unless there's a blended model anymore. You don't need to go all in with Worldwide Express today.
No.
There's other options.
You can't, because then you're just a me too. Okay, great.
Yeah.
How many other are there? But you're different, right? Okay, great.
We have better customer service.
Okay. All right. But that's the challenge of brokerage, is you have to constantly reinvent where and how can you add more value. Right?
Always. Or else if you're not innovating, you're dying. It's the same thing in brokerage as is in tech.
Absolutely. 100%. So it's, the question will be in the migration and how quickly, as long as the shippers, we've got his R92 loaded or his R2012 loaded, and it's the easy button, and this is how we do our comparisons. And
that's how we do our rates.
We do the same thing every year, and we go through, the same process. That's fine. There will be a long tail market for that, but it's not going to be a growing market, right? It's EDI eventually, like that's where it goes. But we don't move quickly in this industry, so there'll be the rabbits that go and adopt something.
That is the saving grace for all those that I just said would not be around long enough, is because no one moves actually quick enough to kill a giant anyways. So, but I do think that it's very clear that is going to happen, and that it's going to affect their core businesses. And will they be able to pivot fast enough? And will their investors care? And Corber bought MercuryGate, I think. So it doesn't.
I think so.
So Corber's a different player. They do a whole lot of different things, and they're worldwide. So maybe that was a strategic move by MercuryGate, saying, hey, we don't have a long growth plan here. Let's exit now. So maybe some of that's happening. I think some of the digital brokerages and freight brokerages in truckload have done that. And I think they were smart to, Transfix was smart to sell to NFI, their brokerage, and build tech, because truckload brokering is becoming a commodity and people are exiting, and it's going to consolidate. Those who do it best and those who do it with technology, I don't have as much opinion on how that's going to go, but I think it'll be well for them. But I'm not an expert at truckload. But what I can see is that if you're an API consolidator and you're charging somebody to connect to you to get rates, tracking, dispatch, document retrieval, PODs, you're eventually going to disappear, because people can do that with each carrier. And it used to be impossible because nobody had engineers in freight. And then it wasn't impossible, but it didn't make sense because it was cheap enough to still use a consolidator. And then as soon as Banyan, P44, and others, there's several others.
Yes. Yeah.
As soon as it was like, if your tech goes down, my whole business is down for a day. It was like, all right, let's move over. And one summer I saw that happen with several players. And then I was like, there's a huge shift happening. Yeah. And now it's because the APIs are getting more standardized. Although I will say FedEx's API is like, they just updated their stuff, and it's a massive build, and like building it in-house. If I was the founder of P44, I would convince somebody not to, because the value prop was, every time they update it, we update it. You don't have to worry about that. We normalize the tracking in the docs. There is a value prop there still, but it's just beginning to be a lot more appealing to just do it yourself really anyways. Yeah. It's like, well, okay, but I can have a dev team in the US and in the Philippines and in Colombia, and I can just have like 5 different teams. And if my system goes down on Azure, I can go to AWS, and it's not that hard to have stability then. So if you think about it long term, that's going. But here's another hot question for you then. Yeah. So you're building Freight Facts, right? And
Yeah.
so you're going to go build that. And I think that's a really unique value prop. What do you think of TMS companies in the next 5 years? If the Digital Council standardizes API access, then a TMS is less valuable than it used to be because, well, the TMS is I'm defining it, which is a rating engine to house your API connections and your carriers to be able to book and track. Now, if you're adding more value, that's good. But there's a lot of companies that were venture capital funded that were a TMS first company that just charged per transaction or a SaaS. They have no other revenue streams. And I feel like if you put a little AI on top of some APIs and you could just build your own. And the reason I feel like this is I've had customers that I've tried to sell our TMS to, just bring it into us that are like, we already do that in-house.
Yeah.
We connect to all 4 of our carriers. And I'm like, oh, my value prop is quickly disintegrating on just TMS. I should have said something about final mile because that's a whole new industry and those carriers don't have APIs. We got those. But do you think TMS is just going to continue to flatten out then as far as value?
I think TMS will continue to carve out more value. It'll just be different value. So I think instead of, you kind of put it in parallel with brokerage value proposition, right? Back in the day, if brokerage exploded because you could do multi-rating, and only brokers could do, multi-carrier rating or have that.
It's been a while since that's been my value prop, but I do remember that at DLS.
And
all your carriers in one platform. Everybody loves it.
Everybody loves it. It'd be huge, bigly. Right? Instead of, because when I started, we were going to website to website to website to website to try to get a rate, or you license this massive, ridiculous amount of infrastructure, and whatever, I won't go there, but loading rates and maintaining rates, and it was just a nightmare. So all of that, you just look from back in the day and how that's evolved, and brokers have still grown and come into the market, out of the market, whatever. So I think that same innovative pressure is just going to exist on the TMS systems.
TMS. They'll have to add value in different ways and have easier. You have to be able to use it within a month instead of a 12-month McLeod contract that takes 12 months.
Yeah, right. So. But and I think that's generous. But I think you're going to see price compression, in some of the TMSs, and I think the winners, because TMS is really selling workflow and reporting, right? Because then they're focused on that. So if you have a TMS that is super configurable, plug and play with different modes and different things, because every customer is going to be different. So those highly customizable versions that are like hands-free, those are going to be the winners. Because they can offer a product at a lower price that's configurable, and everybody's like, this is the perfect workflow. Yes, because it's yours. And it won't work for anyone else.
And then if you have a talented sales engineer and a good sales rep, they show it to them. And if the integration and implementation is free until they use it, and like that's the pricing pressure, because you used to be able to say, hey, here's an activation fee and we charge you per integration. And I don't know, maybe I'll have to now, because I said this, I'll have to invite somebody from Banyan on, but I'm pretty sure, because I compete against them, that they charge, well, I'll just say it. So Banyan, NP44, but Banyan specifically still charges their customers to do an integration for integrations they already have. So one of the customers we wanted to integrate with, we are already integrated with Banyan in that capacity. And the customer's like, yeah, but they're charging me this much money to do it. And I was like, well, why? They've already done it. And I'm like, oh, it's because they have to monitor. If you're a SaaS company and your margins come from SaaS and the margins get compressed, you have to find other ways to make money. And I put this on LinkedIn and Twitter the other week. I think that's why venture capital in freight tech, in TMS specifically, is the exact wrong vehicle, because they need to produce enough revenue for their rule of 40 and continue to grow and add customers. And because they are burning money, that's the model. I'm not saying that's a bad model as long as you get to profitability someday.
It's a bad model.
I've never done it that way.
It's a bad model. It's a horrible model.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'm saying that.
But model now.
But if you do that in TMS world, these TMS companies just find other ways to get to revenue, and they build tools that no customer ever asked for, and they make money from the LTL carriers, or they start doing brokerage inside of it. and that's how they make their money. And it's all, shadows and mirrors. And it's so much cost pressure because there's democratizing access to being able to connect to the carriers. So that's the space I play in, and I'm constantly evolving it and saying, hey, final mile and LTL, connecting them in a meaningful way, I'll have another several years of runway there, and then that will change.
Absolutely.
But I just see that happening in LTL brokerage, and I think that. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say we should connect offline and tell you about some of the strategies we were doing pre-COVID on merging the
Tell
two.
me all about it offline. I want to hear that.
I will.
And this is why it's fun when you say let's connect offline or whatnot, because what I'm hoping to get out of these conversations is, one, Lance and I are already friends. We know each other. We've met in person. He's played the bongo drums at a party I was at. So that means that we're buddies. If you've seen him play harmonica, you can't say you're buddies just yet. Wait till the bongo drums come out. But Lance is a great human being, and he is the godfather of the API. And what I would love out of these conversations is like, hey, by the way, Lance is building a business right now, and so am I. And so there's some synergy there. But I think that I'm trying to take the concept of, there's a lot of these mastermind groups or like founder groups, right? Yeah. And it's all behind the scenes. And then there's a lot of people who have sold their companies who then go on podcasts and they're like, let me tell you all the horror stories of firing people and hiring people and trying to raise money. And they are so open about it. And I'm like, man, that's inspirational. And actually now I've taken a different tact. I'm like, why didn't you say anything about that while you were doing it so I could have learned it sooner? Come on. And so
couldn't tell you, or I was trying to position myself in some way that we know everything, or we don't.
Yeah, you have to be the expert. I'm afraid if I say that I started a truckload brokerage and it was a massive failure and I pivoted to an agent model, I'll lose a customer. And if that's actually what you're afraid of, then you don't have a very successful business, because if you lose one customer because of that, that's weird. Two, even if you did, add 5 more customers, build a sustainable, predictable revenue model, and you'll probably be all right. Add real value to customers and continually look ahead and say, hey, I think APIs are going to be a lot easier, and so I wouldn't have my whole business built on that. I think brokeraging is kind of regressing to the mean. Everybody has similar LTL blanket rates. Before COVID, that wasn't true. There was first tier, second tier, third tier, 3PL portal. There was custom pricing that CH has with FedEx that I don't know how they have it, right? But they still have it. Right. But, now it's significantly regressing to everybody's competitive, and then there's customer service. Well, what's next? So I think that the whole point of this is I'll talk about Rocket on here, and I'm not afraid to do that. And I failed a whole bunch, and I'm 4 years in, and I'm going to succeed a whole bunch too. Absolutely. But I appreciate you being willing to be on here while you're still building something, and be able to say that the VC model is stupid in freight tech. Because I think that I could have somebody convince me that it's not. But I haven't heard a good enough argument that burning money on purpose with the rule of 40 actually works to add value to a company and culture and the customer.
I think that's dead. I think it had its place where there was a path to, okay, we're going to go public, and that's really where the exit is. But there's no disillusionment there. Your most likely exit as an entrepreneur is going to be selling to another entity, whether it's a competitor, a roll up in a tangent,
private equity roll up, or a competitor.
Yeah, and that's fine. But for the love of God, build a profitable business as quick as you can. It's like, okay, this whole market land grabs thing, somebody's going to be left holding the bag. And when you build a business that is profitable, then you can control your own destiny.
There it is. And I think that if there's one takeaway that anybody who's listening to this, who's a business owner, wants to be, or is looking to start something bigger than their solopreneur thing, I used to think that raising money was a good idea, but I realized you couldn't control your own destiny if you did it too early. I still think having angels or investors or even venture capital can work. Yeah. But you have to figure out what the North Star is. If it's an exit, then maybe you should do VC. If you just want to burn it and turn it, I know a couple of people who are very prominent on LinkedIn that burned and turned to truckload brokerage and made a lot of money. Absolutely. And now they're, pretty prominent in the space for doing exactly that. Yeah. And I'm not knocking it, because it takes an extreme dedication to burn money to always have to get a new customer and always have to raise revenue to keep your line of credit from the facility and be able to borrow 110% on your 100% of revenue, it would be so stressful.
Yeah.
But I don't want to have any disillusionment that that's a real business that's like sustainable.
Right.
It was a build and sell. So if you're going to build and sell something sustainable, it has to have profit. And I think that the one thing I've been able to do so far that might be the only thing that I've done right is that I do eventually want to sell rocket shipping and the whole brand, because I'm not going to hand it down to my kids. I'll go into that on a different episode, but I've seen businesses being handed down and it causes a lot of stress. And I've got 3 kids and I'm going to have more. Who gets it? Right. I don't want to go through that stress in life of who gets my business. And I don't want to have somebody take over the business that didn't build it, because I would hate it if I had a business I had to run that I didn't build. It's the only reason I do it is because at least I built it.
Right. Right. Exactly right.
But if you control your own destiny, someday I'll sell rocket shipping and the whole thing, and I'll probably make a lot of money because it's a successful company. But that someday will come whenever my wife, me, my business partners, my employees, and everybody involved thinks it's the right time. And until then, people could try to buy it and I can say no. Yes. But if you do it not profitably and you're burning money, you only have one option: sell or die. Jeffrey Gitomer's book, Sell or Die. There's, that's what it is.
Different message, so, but
different message. But I do love the Little Red Book of Selling, Jeffrey Gitomer. So,
awesome, love it.
So, Lance, one question for you as we wrap this up. Well, I've been asking different variations of this throughout the show as I record these. But what is one thing, you can answer this a couple different ways, but what's one thing that you would tell somebody who's going to start a business or who's running a business, more particularly someone who's running it right now?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for them about finance, HR, hiring, payroll, anything, or just exit, all of that? What mistakes did you make, or something that if you could talk to younger Lance, what would you tell them if they're building it right now and they don't know what they don't know?
Trust your gut more than you think you should, because you know your business better than anyone else on the planet. Get expert counsel wherever you can, especially in matters of HR or finance or whatnot. But trust yourself. Don't outsource the decisions to a board member because they were successful in some other industry. Right.
Oh, gosh, that hits hard.
You know your business better than anyone. And you know all the intricacies that even a board member will never know or never be exposed to, and that you can't even articulate.
Wow. So, that hits hard because one, I've made that mistake. And I think that I've expressed it to a buddy of mine who's running a business. I asked him if he had made a decision on something. He said, I got to talk to my mentor again about it. And I said, do you think maybe you're over mentored? Like, have they ever done exactly what you're about to do? And he said, no. And I said, well, they probably don't have any more credibility than you do on this exact thing. And they're not you.
Right. And
how would they possibly have the context to understand what decision has to be made? And, that really hits hard. That's good advice, Lance. So appreciate it for myself. Hopefully somebody else finds value in that too. Cool. But trust your gut.
Trust your gut. You got this.
Well, hey, I appreciate it. That's another episode of Let's Talk Logistics. Tune in next week for another guest. And this is the great and powerful Lance Healy.
Good to see you, Gabe.